Okay, so in celebration of Girls and Women in STEM Day, which is the 11th of February, I'm joined by Amiya Chaudry. Amiya is a senior lecturer and programme leader in Applied Science and Biochemistry here at the university. She grew up in a science-orientated family, so gravitated naturally, potentially, towards STEM subjects because of her awareness of the job opportunities that were out there. She completed an undergraduate degree in environmental science, which focused on the degradation of plastics, and then went on to further taking that into her PhD studies, which was on the ageing of plastic. So hopefully I've kind of introduced you as kind of succinctly as possible. I haven't missed anything out there. So thank you so much for joining us and doing this little short interview so we kind of get an insight into how you've got into STEM. So we've just got a couple of questions that we're going to work through, so I can't wait to kind of hear a little bit more about your life and what you've done. So if you could start by just explaining to us, what is your specific area of STEM? You know, if you were speaking to somebody else, how would you explain your field to other people?
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come onto this STEM event. Basically, as you mentioned, I did my undergraduate degree in environmental science. Actually, it was really focused on environmental chemistry. And I think a lot of people are aware of all the environmental challenges we are facing. This can be ranging from the energy crisis, the food crisis, loss of biodiversity, and also pollution we are causing, which can be in terms of the carbon dioxide we might be pumping into the atmosphere, or the amount of plastics we are using and pumping these into the landfill or in our water systems. So that was what I was looking at when I was doing my undergraduate degree. And then in your undergraduate degree, what you need to do in your final year, you need to do like a research topic. And I was really interested in plastics. So the more technical name for plastics is polymers. So I was looking at how these plastics, how they would degrade. And that led on to doing a PhD, which was again looking at the aging of plastics. Because in terms of sustainability, again, if you're using a plastic, you really want to think about how long can you use this plastic before you start to replace it. And there may be some people may say, actually, we shouldn't be replacing plastics. We should use them as long as possible. In terms of sustainability, that would be a good idea. But then as scientists, we need to think about, okay, if we're using this plastic for a long time, is it going to be reliable? So again, think about if you've got an aeroplane, which is made out of these plastics, we call them polymers, but we add other things in it, composites. What you don't want to happen mid-flight, there should be a massive crack and the plane fails. So you need to think about, okay, how long can we use these for and how safe and reliable they're going to be whilst in use. So, I mean, that leads on to a lot of different challenges. Again, in modern times now, we are looking at biodegradable plastics. But again, with biodegradable plastics, we need to think how long can we use it, because you don't want to use a biodegradable plastic which is going to fail in its shelf life. So that really is what my area is. You could call it polymer aging, or you could call it material science. So I look at materials which can range from things like looking at using materials in everyday objects like plastic bags, or you could look at more technical materials which you would be using for making cars, or you could be looking at materials used for making aeroplanes.
Brilliant. That sounds really interesting, and it's so topical and relevant now, isn't it? It's in the press, and you know, from a layman's perspective, I watch all the David Attenborough things, and you know, it's always talked about on there in terms of like our plastic oceans, and it's very, very relevant and a hugely kind of impactful and interesting area that you work in, and a lot to consider. So when did you first become interested in this area of your work? Was there a moment when you knew this was just what you wanted to do, I suppose, in terms of being in a STEM subject?
I think I was lucky. My family was really focused on STEM subjects. And so I had a lot of books. There were a lot of family debates focused around STEM subjects. My father graduated in medicine in India in around 1950s. And even in those days, in 1950s in India, there were a lot of female graduates in his class as well. So for him, it didn't matter that he had got daughters. And they should be whether they're going in STEM subjects or not. So I went into a STEM subject, and I've got three sisters, and all of them went into STEM subjects as well. I think I graduated, I focused more towards chemistry. It's just I had a better aptitude for that. I still remember one of the books I had as a child. It was one of these small ladybird books, and it was about Madame Curie, and I was really fascinated by that. And I remember when my dad said, "What would you like to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be like Madame Curie." So I think I just went into that area. I did my A levels in all the STEM subjects, but when it came to choosing my undergraduate program, I chose, rather than choosing a traditional subject like pure chemistry, I went for environmental chemistry, because I was really aware that these are one of the major challenges we are facing, and I was really interested to see where it could lead. And I'm really pleased that I did that. Because, as you know, I still believe it is one of the major challenges humanity is facing at the moment.
Yeah, of course, and being able to work in an area that can be applied so readily, and also such a required area of knowledge must be great to kind of have made that decision a little while ago, but it really being something that is very impactful now.
Exactly, yeah.
And then in terms of any barriers you faced, have you faced any barriers in terms of entering into STEM subjects, or found any resistance to entering into the field at all, I suppose, as a woman in STEM?
I have to say, I have been very lucky. I have read about other colleagues who might have faced barriers, but I think because I had such a strong family support, and then when I came to university, I had a lot of support from my university tutors. And again, at Glendower University, I've had a lot of support. It's been a really, there's been a lot of opportunity to develop my skills and pursue the area I'm interested in. So for one of the areas in terms of looking at environmental issues is the engineering department at Glendower University have been looking at new materials to develop aeroplanes. These new materials will be lighter, and if they're lighter, they will use less energy. But they're made of polymers. So again, if you have an aeroplane made of plastics, polymers, you need to worry about if there's a lightning strike, what happens to the aeroplane is going to get fried up. So how do we develop a new material which won't get impacted by lightning strikes, but at the same time will be very light? So those are the opportunities that have been given when I've had my university career. So I would say, actually, I've been very lucky. I haven't really faced any barriers whatsoever.
That's lovely to hear. It's nice to hear. I suppose the day is here because there's perception that there are barriers, and it's not just a perception, that there are barriers for women entering into STEM, but it's also lovely to hear that actually you haven't faced any of those, and the support of your family and the support of kind of your where you've studied and now where you're working, that actually has helped you to kind of excel in your career and are, you know, able to kind of really make a contribution there, which is, it's great to hear. It's fantastic to hear.
Exactly, make that contribution, and also then forge a path for new women who will be entering this area and give them the opportunity. So yes, I'm in a very privileged position to be giving these opportunities to our graduates as well.
Great. So my next question, so is there something that you have been involved in or worked on that that has been really exciting, or just a really fantastic kind of moment that you kind of hold in really high esteem, that you've been able to work on because of this, the area of work that you've been on the area of work that you've worked in, rather?
I think the interesting thing about STEM subjects is we call them science, technology, engineering, and math, and we tend to focus them in individual areas. But what I found, they overlap. So, for example, I was telling you at Glendower University, one of the opportunities was looking at designing this composite material, which is lighter, therefore it would use less fuel. So it would be really good for the environment. But then how do we make it successful so that it would resist any lightning strikes? So you can look at that in one area. And then in my PhD, I was looking at how polymers degrade. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but here at Glendower University, we have a forensic science department. So I can use, and I have been using some of my skills by looking at, okay, how do polymers, which are plastics, how do they degrade? And plastics, if you think about it, are made of carbon and hydrogen. But then I can apply the same skills which I'm applying for synthetic material or plastic. I can start looking, applying them in this field of forensic science. So I can think about, okay, so how does decomposition happen in an organic specimen? So it could be like an animal specimen we could think about, and that could translate to human specimens in the future. So if you've got a body, how can you age a body? How will it be degrading? So I think that's the key thing which I find so fascinating. One moment you could be working for in environmental issues, the next moment you're using the same skills and looking at forensic issues. And again, forensic science is a new science. I mean, in terms of putting those papers and research articles out there. So it's a wonderful opportunity, and I really love that, being able to apply those technical skills in a completely new area.
Great. It's so interesting to be able to have a passion for what you do and then be able to apply it in so many different areas.
Exactly.
You're not kind of pigeonholed into just because you do one thing. You have to just apply it in one space.
Exactly. So no day is the same. It never gets boring. I'll often get a student knocking and asking a question about one area, and then the next moment somebody else will knock and say, "Oh, I'm interested in this field. What do you think we could do?" And suddenly it's a completely new area. So it's always a new challenge. So that's the wonderful thing about STEM. You can apply those key skill sets in so many different areas, and it's great.
Fantastic. And then my final question is, what inspirational message would you give to other people thinking about going into a STEM subject?
I think the key thing, as we were mentioning with STEM subject, is you will learn key skills, and those key skills are applicable in various areas. So it will never get monotonous, it will never get boring. And I think these days, the challenges we are facing, again, we've spoken about the environmental issues, and those challenges are still here today, and we need to find solutions. And I think the way we can find those solutions are with STEM subjects. And the other thing which we haven't touched on at all are, we've spoken about environmental issues, but another challenge humanity is facing is modern disease. And I'm not mentioning the pandemic as such. I mean, that's been a huge issue, but modern disease like diabetes, how do we deal with these kind of diseases? And I think that, again, STEM subjects are going to help us find solutions to these very difficult challenges we are facing. So anyone thinking about STEM subjects, I would say it's a huge opportunity, and it's certainly a worthwhile and very rewarding experience.
Great. And I think what's really come across from speaking to you is the relevance of being in a STEM subject and the opportunity that you have to explore different paths. It's not just one clear thing that you have to do because you've studied maths or you've studied engineering. Actually, there's intersectionality across all the subjects where you can share ideas and research different areas. So I think that's a really key message that I've picked up from what you've said, and it's been fantastic to listen to you and understand kind of your journey and what you've done and what you've been involved in. So hopefully a lot of other people will find this really interesting, just to understand what you've done. So just once again, thank you so much from me for agreeing to share a little bit of yourself with us today. Thank you so much, Amiya.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all.